start by saying and spelling your complete name, please?
My name is Glenn W. Brown, Glenn. W for Walter, Brown.
And can you tell me what unit you served in the 10th Mountain Division with, please?
Company F, 86th Mountain Infantry.
And was that your only unit you were in the entire time?
In 10th, yes.
And the year that you joined service of the 10th?
In August of 1942.
And highest rank served? The highest rank that you served?
What?
The highest rank that you served in the 10th?
Highest rank? Technician 5th grade.
Okay, T5. Okay. All right, very good. All right, I am good to go. I'm going to start by asking you some general background questions. How did you come to be in the 10th Mountain Division?
I was a replacement after Mount Belvedere and Riva Ridge. Replacement for the casualties.
And the first place that you joined up with the 10th over in Italy was?
I don't remember for sure where the place was, but it was on, I think, March the 6th in 1945.
And so you came in right before the March offensive began?
Yes.
Right, okay, that's interesting. That's a really interesting point of view for yourself, having come in and seeing what these guys had just gone through. What was your impression of what they had gone through?
Well, it made you stop and think and wonder, can I survive another attack like that? Because it's, you know, I don't know whether other men thought this or not, but when you think about you're going to attack in the morning at, say, sunrise, you know that night that some of you are not going to be there. And that's what you think, or what I thought of. They may not be killed, but you'll be so many wounded and so many killed. And you just hope you're not one of them.
What kind of stories did you hear about people having just survived?
Oh, I don't really know very many stories like that. Because really, when you get right down to it, I wasn't in combat all that time, but I really don't know how to answer that.
Having joined up right before the March offensive began, tell me a little bit about what your specific duties were.
Well, when I first joined, we're on a holding pattern and just building up supplies behind us, and we were on just a holding line, and of course we put patrols and outpost duty and such as that. I made one night patrol, and of course had outpost duty at other times.
Tell me, what does a T5 do? What did you
Well,
do on a daily
I
basis?
earned the T5 rating as a cook, and then after I went overseas, I was assigned to a quartermaster bakery, 107th Quartermaster Bakery, and we baked bread for all the troops over there in Italy. In fact, at one time we were the only bakery over there. We was making 1 million pounds of bread a day.
Oh my gosh, you must have been very popular.
Well, of course, it was a pretty big company. I mean, and we had ovens, and they would haul, the divisions would come in there and haul that bread out by the 6x6 truck load, take it to the division, see. But then, after the war progressed so much, and they needed, and the casualties were so heavy and so long a time that they needed infantry men worse than they need bakers. So they broke our company up and put us all through infantry reconversion training.
So let me understand, when you went over there in March, you weren't a baker anymore. You were an infantryman with a rifle.
Well, when after probably in sometime in '44 when they broke the company up. And then, of course, my basic training was infantry in 1942 and '43. I went overseas in July of '43.
Now, when you were there in March of 1945, you were an infantryman then?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure I understood that. Okay, well, why don't you tell me about some of the patrolling you remember and what sort of things you did on patrol?
Some of the what?
Patrolling? You said you did.
Well, we were the only night patrol that I went on. We were to go down and scout out a building was probably a half a mile over into enemy German territory and find out if they were manning that post at night and so on. So I don't know how long the patrol lasted, but probably 3 hours or something like that.
Did you have experience as an outdoorsman before you joined the 10?
Not much, no.
So you became an outdoorsman. Did you find that you had lots of good role models of people to?
Well, I don't know really how to answer that because I've always wanted to be outdoors and like now, a sportsman and hunting and fishing and things like that. There were still things that you like to do outside.
Tell me a little bit about the first memorable war action that you saw in Italy in March.
Well, I think we'd go back to the death of Franklin Roosevelt. We were sitting on the line waiting for this attack when they told us that Roosevelt had died. And you wonder what's going to happen now. Are we still going to have the back? And it's just like the people in the United States. What were their fears when Roosevelt died? Our leader's gone. But then Harry Truman took over, and there was no slack up in the support for the military. And things like that, when you know that you're going to attack the next morning and such as that are on your mind, and it worries you about it.
Tell me a little bit about what you remember from that attack.
Oh, and I think we pushed over. It was daylight, at probably 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and I know the company advanced down this hill. Of course, we were running, and we got down to a creek at the bottom of this hill and started up another one, and the Germans pinned us down there. And several of our men got hit, and that's where Captain Rideout got hit. And when he got hit, we were in this ditch, and he raised up and got up and started up this embankment, had his carbine up over his head and said, "Come on, men." And he got hit, knocked him down, and he got up and done the same thing again. And the medic swore at him a little and told him, "Sit down, Captain, and sit down and shut up." And the executive officer took over. And then,
What were you thinking as all this was going on?
am I next? I don't really know. I mean, you don't think like that. I mean, I didn't. You wonder what's going to happen next, where we're going to go from there. But you know that you are going to go. And we finally advanced on over that hill with support from somebody on our left helped clear out the machine guns that were holding us down.
Do you remember what that hill was?
What?
Do you remember what that hill was?
No,
It was
no, I don't remember.
You know it was Rocca Ruffino?
Right there at Rocker, yes.
What it was. Were you aware that how many Germans were facing you at Rocca Rufino?
No.
Could you feel that it was a stiffer resistance?
Well, the thing that I remember about that was there was a highway that run along the side of the mountain. And every so often there was about a 4x4 concrete culvert that the water run down the mountain and under the road. And in each one of those culverts they had rocked up the front of it, and they had a machine gun in each one of those culverts, so it was pretty hard to get them out of there.
When you looked at Rocca Rufino, do you have any recollection thinking that's a really tall, steep mountain? What did you
No, not really, no. It's, well, that's been 60 years ago. And a lot of things you remember detailed, and a lot of things you don't really have much recollection of what's going on, really.
Now, during that action in the April offensive around Rocca Rufino for you, did you get out without a scratch, or were you?
I was not wounded in any way.
Did you have any
No.
close shaves?
Well, I don't know. You know, you've had shells explode beside of you and this and that and the other, but you don't really know how close it was. But I think anyone that's been on the front and in combat like that had a close shave. They just don't know.
What was your most memorable war experience?
Ooh. Well, I don't know I really don't know which would be the most memorable. I guess really the day they told us the war was over was the most, remember that. But we're at the head of Lake Garda when that happened.
And how do you remember celebrating?
We didn't. I mean, as far as I know, there was no celebration among the troops when they told us that the Germans were giving up, and we just, I don't remember any great celebration of any kind.
Now, you're an interesting person because you came in as a replacement into a group of men that had been together for a long time. And you're unusual because you came in like that and you sort of integrated yourself in. How did it feel to be coming into a group of guys that had been together for a while and knew each other well?
Well, you might have felt strange at first, but it wasn't very long. As soon as you got into combat, that was gone. It didn't make any difference. You were comrades. And it didn't make any difference how long they'd been there or how long you'd been there. We were all for a common cause.
And what do you think was that common cause? You had to put your finger on it.
Well, the common cause was defeating the Germans and the Japanese and getting to come home.
When you first joined the 10th as a replacement, what was your impression of them?
Well, you might say this, I had been in so many different groups of soldiers that just another group of soldiers, and we were all, like I say, for a common cause, and you adapted to the surroundings and their habits.
Anything strike you as these guys being different about their habits? Anything strike you about them?
Oh, I don't know about that, because we all had the same idea that we want to get this war over and we want to go home, see our families.
You're an interesting guy because you've had experience with lots of different groups, and a lot of people hadn't had that. So, I'm asking questions that are a little bit different because you have different, fresh eyes.
Well, I don't know. One thing that I marveled at was when we were moving ahead and going up a mountain, how much easier they could do that than I could. 'Cause I hadn't had the training that they had. If they could, of course, not having any training, I'd just go out straight up the mountain. But they didn't do that. They switched back and forth and walked slower because they knew they were going to get to the top, and that was the easiest way to get there.
Did you feel like you picked up some good outside mountaineering tips from them?
Yes. Yes.
Now, let's go back to the March Offensive, because you came in right at the beginning of the March Offensive.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a sense that you guys were about to do something pretty big? Did you know that it was going to...
I had no, well, I of course had a vague idea what I thought combat would be like. But when we made our first attack, there we are, a bunch of soldiers lined up running down this hill. Nobody firing any shells because there was no Germans inside or anything like that. And we didn't really get any fire until we got nearly to the bottom of that hill. And then we got machine gun fire from the machine guns that were set up on this highway. And you see some of those men get hit and down and help them what you can, but to describe your feelings, then I don't know what to say.
Did you have any sense that the Germans were highly resistant against the 10th by this time because they were being kind of pushed and pushed and pushed? Did you have any sense that they were really, really getting resistant to being pushed?
Well, I don't know, because by that time, that late in the war, the Germans were short in supplies, and they were fighting on different fronts, and the Americans in Italy was giving them no time to stop and rest. Or when we broke through their second line, I believe it was Gustav or something like the line. When we got through that, the resistance was spasmodic as far as I remember. Like when we were in Lake Garda, there was resistance, but it was more or less artillery and machine gun fire. There wasn't that many soldiers there.
Tell me your impression of artillery fire, the German artillery.
Well, it's pretty fierce. I was very fortunate. I know that other outfits, they had what they call, the shells would hit the timber and explode above you, and that was real fierce. But what artillery that I encountered was landing close to you and shaking you around and this and that and the other. But my personal experience, I was more aware of machine gun fire than the artillery. I don't know why, but...
Did you seem to encounter a lot of machine gun fire?
Yes.
Or are you just more aware of it?
Yes. I know one time we were pinned down by a machine gun, and when we finally silenced it, there was a young German boy there that looked like he's over 14. Just one German out there with a machine gun with a field of fire that just spraying bullets out there, and you see that. That's why I think more about machine gun fire than artillery.
Do a lot of damage, and you could see it. Did you have any experiences that stand out as being a little funny in the midst of all this chaos?
Well, my squad leader, Sergeant Beale, I don't know, had an attack, and he took off his helmet, and his head was bleeding, and a piece of shrapnel had hit his helmet and went in and cut his head, and then come on out, and the shrapnel was between the helmet liner and the steel helmet, and you know, you think about that, and you kind of laugh about that. See, is that close? And when he took that off and he saw it, and he took his helmet liner all apart, there was the piece of shrapnel still in there. But it's kind of like when Captain Rideout got hit. I don't see how in the world I know that blood all over the side of his face and everything, that it went through there and through his cheek and never touched a tooth. You know, but you think about that, well, it's kind of comical. Those things could happen. You couldn't plan it and make it happen that way.
What experience did you have with surrendering Germans as you started moving up?
Did I have what?
Did you have any experience with surrendering Germans as you started moving up towards Garda?
Oh yes. After we got across the Po Valley, we pretty well had them moving back, and then when we got to Lake Garda, there was some fighting there. We were between the lake and the cliff, and they had bunkers up on the cliffs and such as that. And, one evening, just before dark, we'd made this attack, and my assistant squad leader, Paul Brown, and Abel Boone from Salt Lake City, Utah, who they're both dead now. And we stayed on the same, instead of going down and coming up, we stayed on the same level, went around there, and there was a bunker over there, and we took 19 Germans out of that bunker and brought them down that trail down that hill before dark. I wanted a German Luger or P-38 souvenir, and I didn't have one. And in this bunker where these men were, I went in there. I know now it was probably foolish, but I went in there and there was some candles burning, and laying there on a bench was a P-38 torn apart. And I didn't know for sure whether I had all the pieces or not. But I grabbed up those pieces, the mountain pants we had on had a big pocket on the side, and I put them pieces in that pocket. And when we got those soldiers or prisoners back down off that mountain, I did have enough to put that pistol together, and I still have it. But I got my souvenir off of that. We were very fortunate to be able to get those men off of there without any more trouble than we had.
Tell me how it happened that you got those 19 POWs.
Well, I don't know that. We were around there, and we could hear them in there, and we just told them to come out. And there's always, seemed like always, there was one German that could speak English, or some of it anyway. And they came out. And as they come out, your hands over your head, and
did they seem relieved to have it over?
oh yes, oh yes. And you know, in the excitement of the present moment, you don't think about what if they turn on us. Your job was to get them down off of that mountain. See, that's what you thought about.
And that mountain, just so I make sure I understand, was that in March?
That was alongside of Lake Garda, just
Oh,
before
way
the
up
war
by
was
Lake
over,
Garda.
probably in April.
Okay, very good. At Lake Garda, did you go, how did you get to Nago? Did you go through all the tunnels then?
Oh, yes. The first tunnels we saw when we came up there, they were, I don't know whether self-propelled or what kind of artillery they had in there, but they had artillery firing on us out of those, and they brought up tank destroyers and stopped that. But then on below them there were some tunnels that were blown up. That's when they brought the ducks up and took us around those tunnels.
How did you feel about getting on those ducks? Were you happy to get on the ducks?
You was happy to get off the duck, not on it. Really, well, like I say, what do you feel? That's what they told you to do, and you know you've got to get around there, see. And when I think back now, that one duck that artillery group was on, that lieutenant kept loading more on and the driver telling him no. I think, well, that could have happened to us just as well as them. And besides that, when you're out there bobbing around on that lake, Lake Garda's a pretty good sized lake. And, but you were glad to get off of it. Then we advanced, and that's just one duck ride is all we, and then on up there where Colonel Darby was killed. I was through that tunnel right after that happened.
What do you remember about that?
Well, it was at night when we went through there. And we were tired and given out. And we were in more or less in reserve, the reserve company or platoon, I don't remember which. And every time you got a chance to stop, you'd sit down, and I had my pack fixed where I could just scoot down and lay my head back. And if somebody didn't do something, you'd be asleep for a little bit. But and then I woke up in that tunnel where these went in there in the dark. It's daylight when we came out of there, and that's where all these men were killed in that tunnel.
Were they still there when you were there?
Yes.
Oh, so you didn't realize they were there when you went to sleep?
No.
What did it look like?
Huh?
What did it look like?
Oh no, let's don't talk about that.
Were you surprised?
Surprised? I don't think so. At that time, you weren't surprised at anything. Really?
How many wounded and killed did you see in that tunnel?
I don't know. I think I've read where it was 22, but I'm not sure of that. I wouldn't have any idea, but I've heard that it was 22.
That's hard to believe. Let's talk a little bit about where you went after the war was over in May. Did your company go up along the Yugoslavian border?
Yes, I was. Well, they moved us out from Lake Garda. We bivouacked on an old airport, and then they moved us by truck over by the Yugoslav border. And that's where I was. They transferred me out of the 10th Mountain Division because I had enough points to go home and get discharged. I had more time in the Army. I had more time overseas than most of the 10th Mountain men had in the Army. So I was in the, and I regret that they transferred me out for different reasons. But now, since I got acquainted with the association, I found out that they got home before I did because they were going to Japan, see. And I came home and they transferred me into the 85th Division. And I came home with them. And I was on the ship coming home when they announced that they'd dropped the atomic bomb. And the 85th Division had far more combat time than the 10th did, but so did the other division. But the point I'm thinking about was, you read that people protested and talked about they shouldn't have done that. Well, I think he should have done it just as quick as they got that bomb where it'd go off. And there was nobody on that ship complaining because they dropped it. But I come on home then, and another thing, I was discharged from Company I believe it's 137th Infantry. And that's on my discharge papers. And I'd rather had the 10th Mountain.
Tell me what it was like for you up on the Yugoslavian border. What did you do on a day-to-day
Well,
basis?
just guard duty, just go walking guard posts, and there's one place there. If the Americans put a guard on a post, the Italians would put a guard on the post. The Italian partisans and the Yugoslav partisans, there'd be four of us on the same post from represent different people. There's the idea of, I think the reason they put us up there was to keep either the Italians from invading Yugoslavia or vice versa. Just to put down any trouble that started there. But that's where I was when I left the 10th Mountain.
Tell me what it was like to be at a guard post with all these different factions.
Oh, yeah, the war was over, and it was just a duty to do. And you didn't have it. They didn't bother you, you didn't bother them, and you just went on about your business.
Were you worried that something might start?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Because at that time, soldiers from all the countries, I think they had out all the war that they wanted. And the people had all the war that they wanted. And they just wanted to get things back to normal.
Now, we're getting to the end of all my big questions. Is there something you want to add, something that you'll regret not saying?
Oh, not really, except that since I had to be in combat, I'm glad I was with the 10th. And I'm glad for the relationship that I've had with the association. I was with the Armadillo chapter when we were formed 20 years ago. And I've enjoyed just like seeing these people now and talk to them. You see them once a year, and people you never really never knew. And all the time that I've been going to these meetings, I saw one man that I served with, and he was on that mountain with me when I got those prisoners, Paul Brown. But he's gone now.
Can you think of anything else?
No, I think that's about enough for me.
Good deal. You did a nice job.
Huh?
Want to ask him?
Uh,